And if I had a third foot, it would be in the US, where I was educated. So I can totally see why there's so much misunderstanding and incomprehension about this mega country that has defied conventional wisdom. So let's start out with how China's innovating. Now, innovation isn't just about inventing the next new thing, like the iPhone or 3D printing or sending people to Mars, technologies that go from 0 to 1. It could be new applications, business models, better processes that lower costs. These one-to-N innovations are just as important. Whatever makes us leaner, cleaner, and more productive all count. So TikTok might not be the first short video app, but it has garnered more than 1 billion users around the world. The Chinese EV company, BYD, didn't make the first prototype. But compared to Tesla's price point, the $15,000 EV cabs that I've taken with 500,000 kilometers of range can meaningfully lead to lower emissions and mass adoption. And in the same way, Chinese mobile phones might not be as revolutionary as iPhone, but in African countries, their market share is well over half. So this actually solves one big problem for developing countries, which is the lack of access to suitable technologies that they can actually use. And even if China doesn't do many 0 to 1 technologies yet, at least not yet, it doesn't mean that it can't master high tech, right? It conducted the first quantum video call, and it launched the first drone that can carry a passenger in air. So let's go behind the scenes. Now, yes, many of you would say China's got money, markets, talent, and troves of data, which is so critical in this information age. But it wasn't just that. Part of the success was also a whole nation approach, or what they call a 举国 system. So turning an idea or scientific discovery into commercial success requires an innovation ecosystem. The collaboration of universities, national labs, and industries, not to mention an enormous amount of funding that covers long and uncertain investment cycles. Now, many of you might think that groundbreaking technologies are the products of stars, the likes of Steve Jobs or Elon Musk's. But every time you use the internet, the GPS, or yell at your Alexa, you have the US government to thank for. We often forget that the Apollo program, the Manhattan Project, even Japan's rise to semiconductor stardom were all horizontal systems with critical state backing. Now, China's 举国 system is an entire nation behind one strategic goal: mobilizing national resources, casting the net wide, not tallying costs. And it's the same system that's used to reap as many Olympic gold medals as possible. And so thanks to this ecosystem, China became the largest consumer and producers of EVs in less than a decade, with more cars sold there than in the rest of the world combined in 2020. Now, in the West, we often talk about nudging consumers to make better choices. But in China, mass adoption of next-gen transportation happened like that. Well, in part thanks to the state rolling out 4 million charging stations around the country, coordinating supply chains from battery makers to control systems and manufacturers. Today, there are 140,000 chargers in the US in the entire country. So that is kind of the whole nation approach, but that's not actually the story I want to tell you. There's an even more nuanced story that happens on the ground. And we call it the mayor economy. And it's a decentralized economic model that galvanizes creativity from the ground up. And contrary to popular perception, it isn't a centralized approach dominated by an almighty state. And so here's how it works. So NIO is one of the top 3 EV companies in China. Its cars are driven everywhere on the streets of Beijing and Shanghai. Now, 2 years after it was listed on NASDAQ in 2018, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Now, at this point, the local government of Hefei, a small town in eastern China with 5 million people, convinced it to move its headquarters there. The local government injected $1 billion in exchange for a 25% stake, arranged more loans for the company, and most importantly, organized an entire supply chain around NIO. It took only a year before NIO's production grew by 81%. Its market cap went from $4 to $100 billion. And the local government of Hefei cashed out within a year, and NIO's life was saved. And so for every local government behind a NIO, there's another mayor behind a competitor. And there are literally hundreds of EV companies vying for survival in ruthless competition. So if you are actually a promising tech company, local governments will move mountains to help. Remove red tape, check. Find you more financing, check. Get a job for your spouse, check. Piece of cake. They are a one-stop shop, as they like to call themselves. Now, in the vigorous bid for Amazon's second headquarters, there were some creative offers. One state sent a giant cactus as a gift. Another state offered to rename a town Amazon. But it basically came to some tax breaks, not quite like what the Chinese mayors had to offer. But of course, the US government is no stranger to supporting big shot companies like SpaceX and Tesla, offering billions in benefits. But in China, it's really this marriage between hypercharged local officials and intrepid entrepreneurs of all ilk that is at the heart of its model. And here's why. So the local government of Hefei, the one that made a killing with NIO, well, it wasn't just after the return on investment per se, but it was by luring companies like NIO that is looking to create a mini Silicon Valley of sorts, an industrial cluster, a talent pool, a flourishing retail and service industry. That gets them more jobs, more tax revenues. And guess what? Even the real estate and land they own are suddenly worth more, all because of the economics of agglomeration and multiplier effects. Because the local mayors are actually an equity stakeholder of the entire city. So, in sum, it's this political centralization and economic decentralization that is actually a simple representation of China's model. It's the same model used to urbanize, to grow, and now to innovate. Now, for all of its successes, there were huge costs, I admit. Waste left in the wake, inefficient investments, wrong bets. Now, some of these challenges are being addressed, thankfully, like environmental degradation, but there are others that remain in urgent need of fixing. So I'm not suggesting that there's some universal recipe, or that it's perfect, or that it can be